Welcome, everybody. We have a very interesting topic to discuss today. And before we get started, I would like to go through a small little disclaimer. This session is strictly for educational purposes and should not be considered as a legal, accounting, or investment advice. If you have any legal questions, please consult with your own attorney, financial advisor, and CPA. And this session is strictly for educational purposes only. And I would like to welcome our guest, Ruben, today. He's my good friend over the years and he's been doing wonders. He has an awesome podcast where he has millions of listeners, and his podcast name is Capital Raisers Podcast. So I'm going to give you a little bit intro about Ruben. Ruben has been working in heavy lift apartments and value add multifamily syndication since 2019. He found his niche in developing co-GP partnerships while also launching the Capital Raiser Show podcast. Through the podcast, Ruben provides thought leadership and creates content to help syndicators raise capital passively using best practices in technology, marketing, and psychology. He has taken multiple syndications, and today we'll be discussing capital raising strategies with Ruben Drath. Welcome, Ruben. Super excited to have you.
Yeah, honored to be here. It's been really cool hanging out with you over the last couple of months, like really increasing our friendship and putting some things together on paper and in our thoughts about what we want to do in the future, work together on capital raises and a couple other things. So this is a real honor to be here. I really appreciate it. You know, what I was thinking is, I've spoken at a lot of presentations and, been on people's podcasts. One thing that might be useful is to kind of just take my timeline of what I've gone through and potentially break down some of those parts. And then I'm going to kind of go through this book that I'm writing with Richard Wilson of the Family Office Club and kind of show you all of the different chapters of this capital raising strategies book that we're writing. And so you guys can kind of see that this whole world of capital raising and universe that I've been exposed to through my show and by interviewing 250 plus of the top syndicators across the country is really expansive. And you would think that, capital raising can be condensed and boiled down to just going out and talking to people and sharing a little bit about what you do and finding out if there's an alignment of interest and asking for money and see if people want to invest in your deals. But it's way more than that, as we'll see. But so I got my start originally, I guess, when my dad planted a seed in me back when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. He would drive me around in his blue truck, in his blue Ford Explorer truck, to the different houses that he owned and collect rent. And, I would see him engage with the residents who he was friends with a lot of them, which obviously it's not the best use of your time to be the landlord. But the seed was planted. I want to be like my dad. My dad does real estate and he gets these big wads of money from renters on a regular basis. He died when I was relatively early. But I took that and was like, if I'm going to be like him, I got to figure out how to get into real estate at some point. And I didn't know exactly where to start. So I was like, well, after I got my degree in chemistry, if I'm not going to pursue medicine or pharmaceutical sales or anything that I could do with my chemistry degree, and I want to get into real estate, maybe it would be a good idea to take my degree and apply for some kind of a mortgage job. So I got hired by Wells Fargo Home Mortgage in the Spanish division and learned everything about selling loans. But at the end of the day, it wasn't helping me get into real estate. So I was looking for groups, found a educational platform that was teaching a bunch of different strategies, probably like 40 different, it was fix and flip and wholesaling, et cetera, et cetera. And one class that they had was on multifamily. And as soon as I learned about forcing appreciation and cash flow and, divide and conquer, which is like basically take a 12 pack and divide it into 12 individual sodas that you could sell for a lot more than you could with a 12 pack. I was like, oh my God, this is a crazy strategy. So I got hooked and I started a meetup where I was talking about local multifamily real estate. This one guy, I think this is in 2009, right after the real estate crash, he showed up at my meetup, had lost everything that he had in spec homes out in San Diego, and was buying a fourplex every other week, it seemed like. And he had a bankruptcy because he lost all his money. And I was just like watching him and so curious, how are you taking down these fourplexes with a bankruptcy? Because I know you're not financing them. So I determined that he was raising capital for them. And I was curious. I'm like, hey, dude, Ivan, can I follow you to your projects? Put you on camera. You can tell the audience about how you found the deal, how you're going to tenant occupy the deal, how you negotiated the deal, and what you're going to do to rehab it, and how you're going to tenant occupy it, and how you're going to put it back on the market and resell it with astronomical cash flows along the way. And he's like, yeah, sure. So I followed him around with the concept, I'm just going to put this stuff on YouTube and Facebook and anywhere else where people could potentially listen and see if we can create a marketing presence and raise some capital. In this particular moment of time, I was not syndicating. I was specifically raising from joint venture capital, which is a specific type of capital from my perspective. Some people will say joint ventures are partnerships. They're not a form of raising capital, but I was taking down fourplexes with none of my own money. So as far as I was concerned, I was raising capital, right? These partners had ongoing duties. There was no passive investors in these, but we ended up from these videos, posting them on YouTube and everywhere else that we could think of. We had some people flying to town. We had some local investors and they started partnering with us. And we took down a fourplex, a threeplex, a fourplex, a 12plex. And then we had a 42 unit project under contract. And I was like, I've arrived, I'm finally an investor. I got my investor label. And then he and I started fighting. And then I ended up selling all of those properties for a profit. But I ended up going, well, what do I do now? Like I don't have a partner. I don't know how to operate. I know how to find deals, but I don't know how to do like the general contractor management and all of that stuff. And I kind of whittled away with my tail between my legs, went back to corporate America. I feel like there's this old show called, I think, Taxi, where there's this actor, he'd go out and, be a success, and then he wouldn't be able to find any more jobs and he ended up driving a taxi again. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, that's so defeated. I was an investor. I had everything in place. And now, I don't have anything. So I knew fourplexes. I wanted to get back into it, took a couple years off, went down to Mexico, came back and was like, all right, I need to do this fourplex strategy. And I created this methodical program where I was like, oh, I'll buy one fourplex, I'll build down the equity, buy another fourplex, and I'll keep on doubling my portfolio. I'll go from one fourplex to four fourplexes to 16 to 32. And at 32 fourplexes, I'll have 128 units. And I will cash flow and I'll be done. And I took this plan to somebody at the local Arizona Real Estate Investors Association. I'm from Phoenix. And they're like, okay, cool. 128 units. Why don't you just take them all down now? And I was like, what? Like, I don't know how to do that. That's crazy. They're like, well, there's this thing called partnerships where you can create these syndications, raise capital from people, and it's a team sport, and you can take down all 128 units on your first deal. And I was like mind blown. So I started interviewing local syndicators and getting on the phone with a bunch of coaching programs. I did a lot of Google research and found the Jake and Geno's and Joe Fairless, got his book. And one of the local groups, I went and interviewed them and was like, hey, I want to start syndicating. Can you tell me who do I need on my team to start taking down these large properties? And they're like, well, what do you care? And I'm like, well, I used to have a platform on YouTube and I raised some capital for fourplexes and I feel like I'm good at marketing and raising capital. And I want to get into the syndication game. And they're like, really? How much did you raise? I'm like, $625,000. They're like, you know what? We need somebody like you. Why don't you just come work with us? So I basically was brought on as an apprentice. They were very good at owning, operating, and acquiring and underwriting deals, but they kind of sucked at raising capital. They were primarily wholesalers that moved into syndication, but they raised all of their money from like hard money lenders. So they had success. They had like 2,000 houses that they had flipped and wholesaled. But now that they were moving into this world of syndication, they didn't have any structure. any communications ongoing with investors. But we ended up taking down a 90 unit. They had already done like 16 syndications, primarily getting their money from like bridge loans. They didn't have a lot of liquidity, which is an important part because you need liquidity in order to refinance. So they would take down properties, but they wouldn't be able to refinance it. So instead of keeping them or being able to refinance once they're stabilized, they would have to sell these things. But they're like, Ruben, we brought you on to raise capital, man. You said that you had a platform, you can raise all this money. Where's the money? And I'm just like, well, I was like stuttering, like I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And neither did they when it came to raising capital. But I started this podcast specifically to learn about raising capital for syndications and learning communication structures. And primarily in the beginning days was like, how do I raise from LPs? And I found out very quickly that this was a long process. And you don't even, no matter how great your deal is, you can't take your deal to people and raise capital once it's already under contract and you're raising. You have to raise the capital way before the deal. So my solution was, well, I'll just go get some people, because I had a good network already at this point, that will potentially partner with us, bring their databases of capital, and then we'll give them a piece of the syndication or ownership of the property or make them an officer of our company. They'll bring their database of investors. And this particular style of capital raising is what is referred to as co-GPs, right? So we would take some up and coming, aspiring co-GPs or general partners, people that wanted their next level up, that had already been priming their market. And I ended up raising about $1 million for a couple of projects. And I was like, sweet, I'm back in business. What I found out working with this group is that they had spoken a really nice game about, we take care of the residents. We're really great at this. And then what I found out as I was working with them is that people would come into the office and say, hey, where's my money? And that they had some unsatisfied investors. And I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, like what if somebody complains to the SEC and I'm associated with this company and I can no longer capital raise, and somebody says, you've been screwing people. So I left that company after learning a great deal with them, and then went off to go launch my own fund, because I had heard that this is a great way of raising capital legally, compliantly within SEC guidelines. You could take a co-GP, make them part owner of your fund, and then you could raise capital for other people without having an ongoing duty, because you can't just, for those of you guys that are, learning about compliance laws, you can't just raise capital and then be done and then walk away without a broker-dealer license. You can violate securities laws if you're not an actual general partner or co-GP partner in the deal with an ongoing duty, whether that's asset management or marketing or something where you're doing more than just phone calls every week. And so I went off to go launch my own fund when one of the people that I had interviewed on my show is just like, hey, I heard that you left your company. Why don't, instead of you starting your own fund, come work with me? I'm already a fund manager. I need some help with the marketing, the branding, the exposure, the capital raising, all of it, right? So all the things that he sucked at, that he didn't want to do, he's like, come on with me. We'll build this company called Legacy Acquisitions, and then we'll go and raise capital for other multifamily syndicators. And I was sold. I was like, yeah, sign me up. After a few months of negotiating, we ended up partnering on Legacy. So I'm part owner of that company, which is crazy because a couple of years prior to that, like I was selling couches out of my house. Like I had no business back in real estate, even though I had a kind of track record from back in the day during the crash. So I went from selling couches to being an apprentice to being a fund manager to now raising capital for other people across the country and learning and stepping into this process of building out limited partner databases. And what I found out along the way is that this just raising from limited partners is a really comprehensive long-term strategy. What are the differences there? Finding investors, where do you even get these guys? And if you do get them, can you profile them? Are there different mindsets that investors have? Like, are some people really focused on the power that they get from being a syndicator or being a passive investor in these deals? Are they kind of these flashy guys that are investing because they want to have fancy cars? Are they pretty scared of investing and want you to manage all their money? So depending on their profile, you're going to have completely different conversations with them. Partnering with capital raisers to create larger sponsor checks. I did this MBA study I'm going to share with you guys here in a second. That was one of my chapters. And strategic versus tactical marketing. So it's just like an explosion of concepts that if you're effectively raising capital, you're working with at least some of these. Or here's something that I've seen too from other capital raisers. Sometimes it's just the power of your network. Like, were you raised by a person that's already syndicating and you have access to their network and kind of have that leg up? Or are you an ultra high net worth family office type person and that has already been raised with people that want to partner with you? It's going to be typically a lot easier for you to raise capital than if you were raised in poverty and absolutely nobody that is interested in investing, period, much less in your syndications. And how do you deal with that? So it's kind of crazy. I wanted to kind of just survey the audience and see if there's any of these specific things that you are interested in hearing about, whether it's avatar creation or authority platforms or communication infrastructure, websites, the list goes on and on. Anything in particular? If not, then I'll just keep on rattling off some of the things that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, no. Let's stop right here because you threw out so many golden nuggets. Let's give it a little bit strategic direction over here. So let's start with the mindset and branding first, because that's the most important things, because we live in the internet age, or I would say information technology age, and then you can leverage all those tools available. Those are out there for you to create your branding or position yourself in a way that the money follows you. You're not following the money. So that's what the goal is. So we're going to do series of this meetups, at least once a month or bi-weekly. So every time we bring a new topic between you and me. So let's talk about today mindset. A lot of people are so hesitant when they think about capital raising. Oh my God, they just kind of freeze. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to ask people money, because a lot of people think, I heard this terminology over and over again. They say, you know what, I love syndication, but I hate begging for money. So this is so negative. So if you can talk about that, let's start from there.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is mindset is incorporated and can be individualized to each one of those topics. Like, what's your mindset behind branding? What's your confidence level? When you're story selling, how are you doing it? I read this book recently called How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill. And it's basically, if you go back to 1920, it's a version of a podcast where Napoleon Hill is literally interviewing Andrew Carnegie and asking him about all these questions. It's like the old school version of a podcast. And Andrew Carnegie goes on and talks about mindset, specifically around confidence. And I had this one kind of dilemma as I've been coming up in the syndication game, which is like, I like the idea of partnerships and getting into syndication, but I don't like this idea of like, in order for me to have success, I have to work harder than anybody and everybody out there and drive myself into a hole with all of this pressure and responsibility. Because I like to think that if you partner with the right people, you can work smart instead of work hard. And I'm a big believer of this proponent, because like I was talking to a real estate coach, a capital raising coach, and I was telling him, I was like, I have all these systems in place and the capital raiser show and yada, yada. And, like sometimes I'm a little scared of success. And, I kept on telling, and he's like, wait, hold on, go back. Did you just say that you were afraid of success? And I had to stop and think. And I was like, yeah, it terrifies me. And he's like, why? And I was just like, well, because I feel like if in order to be successful, that means I'm going to be trapped into this box. I'm going to be, surrounded with bars, and I'm going to be forced to be responsible and work hard. And I didn't get into this business so that I could work my brains out until like I'm beat down into the ground. And he's like, what, Ruben, that's completely the wrong mindset. What if I told you that with systems, with the right people, with the right partnerships, you could work less and have a greater impact and become more successful than you could ever imagine being. And I was just like, I mean, I kind of understood the concept, but I was like, that can't apply to me, right? Like I have to outwork. And he's like, no. So I kind of went into this concept of like, I'm going to go and find strategic partners where I can just focus on some things and still be able to take vacations, because I didn't get into this business so that I'd work 80 hours a week for the next 20 years. I want to work really smart. And after reading this book earlier this year, which is How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill, it explains that all of the most successful people that Andrew Carnegie knew were all, they had some specific qualities, and some of them were to be extremely focused on just one thing, not be one of these guys that goes from business to business to business, that jumps around, that has shiny object syndrome, but that specializes in one thing. You know, for him, it was becoming a steel magnet and selling more steel than anybody else. And he didn't do all these other things. And for me, it's capital raising, which incorporates all of these different topics. But he said every single one of these incredibly successful, like billionaire status people, they have one thing that's crazier or more consistent within them than anything else, which was the thing that I didn't want, which was to stay focused and crank away and work harder than anybody else they knew. And I was just like, wait, this is not what I wanted. And I think I have surrendered to the fact that I have to do it this way. I mean, I understand the concept of leverage and using systems and working intelligently, but even with that concept, according to Napoleon Hill in his interview with Andrew Carnegie, you have to be committed and be so resilient and resistant, because as an entrepreneur, if you're treating it as a hobby, or like, I just want to work smart and kind of, do a little bit here part-time, it's going to be a super long uphill battle versus if you just really lock down and focus and put a lot of power into yourself and what you're doing with one specific thing. So that's been kind of like my mindset shift this year. But, we can go into like a million topics when it comes to mindset like this, which is a lot of thing that a lot of the concepts that the entire country as a whole has, right? Which is limiting beliefs and how do you how do you handle that? And when you're looking at syndication and getting into these large multifamily properties or commercial real estate assets, you're thinking to yourself, probably, unless you were raised very wealthy, well, I've never bought a $10 million property. No one in my family has bought a $10 million property. So how can I be the first one that buys a 10, 20, $30 million property? Like, what gives me the right? And you automatically have to break the stigma of, I'm not capable of doing it. And the way that you do this is basically by hanging out with people that are already doing it. They say, if you want to be skinny, go hang out with 5 skinny people. And if you want to be rich, go hang out with 5 rich people. And what I've noticed, because a lot of people are very intimidated to talk to these, well-known and savvy syndicators, is like, I can never be like them. But if you realize that by interviewing them, is that these people that are taking down $40 million properties, they're just regular mortal human beings like you and I, people that you went to high school with. They've got some level of sophistication, but they're no different than you. I was on an investor call, or not an investor, a networking event just Tuesday at Tim Mai's event. And I went into a breakout room, and this kid, like, he started fumbling around, and he's just like, I'm starstruck. Like, I can't believe I listen to your show all the time. But it goes back to this mindset, right? That I had been talking about a couple minutes ago. It's like, what gives me the right to even be able to purchase a $10 million property? And when you start going to these networking events and you're realizing that all these dudes around the world really are investing and taking down these large properties, and they seem like regular human beings, you start to believe, well, perhaps I'm capable of it. And then, over time, if you create a platform or if you do enough networking, you'll find some partners. So that's one thing, is the belief that you can do it. And part of that is just like seeing the people that are in this space and realizing that they're not anything crazy. They're just normal human beings like you and I, and we can all do this. So that's part of the mindset. You can go into sales psychology.
Okay,
You
let me
can,
stop you here. Let me
yeah,
stop you here. We're talking about mindset today, so we're going to talk about that a little bit more because that's the biggest hurdle. So you talk about multiple things over here. You talk about, you give the example of $10 million property. Somebody never had that experience before. They won't be able to do it because what happens in our lifetimes, whatever our experiences are or whatever our perception is, we can only process that much information. And I'm sorry, using this language here, processing information, because I come from an IT world. So in my world, everything is being processed either by the computer or by the mind. So in order to increase your perception or your knowledge, what you have to do is you have to acquire more knowledge. You have, like he was saying, Ruben was saying earlier, that you have need to hang out with the right people. You need to tap into right resources, try to understand who you are. Because what we're talking about here is what Ruben was talking earlier, mainly is tapping into yourself, turn inwards, figure out who you are first in order to create your avatar in the market, how you connect with people. Unless you understand yourself enough, you won't be able to make the right connections, because once you know who you are, you're tapping into some different energy level because you know where you're vibrating. Accordingly, you're going to be creating your avatar.
but what I would say is that, you mentioned you have to educate yourself and learn about this product, but I want to mention this one thing that I really have at the front of my mind that I want to get out of my system, which is the law of the first deal. A lot of the guys that I ask about mindset, and ladies that come on the show, I'm like, so how do you deal with limiting beliefs? How do you, what's your advice? What's your input for people that are getting going? And they always say, a lot of times they say, it's the law of the first deal. If you can just get your first deal, then your confidence level skyrockets, because you know that you can at least do whatever it was that you did to get to that one deal. So by any and all means, go out and figure out a way to participate in your first deal. And for some people, that may be just do a passive investment, which is an incredibly crazy process in itself, right? Like, you're giving somebody $50,000 of your hard-earned money. If you can break through that, that's a big piece. And then as you see the infrastructure of the people that are syndicating the deal that you're invested in, you start to realize, okay, this is something manageable. And that's kind of part of the mindset too. I would say, like, my biggest mentors on the mindset part are Tony Robbins, who likes to talk about success is 80% psychology and 20% mechanism or strategy, I think is the word that he uses. I would also say, if you want to go down spiritual roads and you're not a reader, there's this great book, or this great movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? And if you are a reader, Dr. Joe Dispenza is very, very powerful and uses all of these proven science to show that manifestation and the law of attraction and the use of meditation actually will allow you to bring things into existence. And Wayne Dyer is a great spiritual coach of mine too. I'm
That's
a
true.
huge follower of him. And he actually brings some conflict of mindset to me too, right? Because I think in his earlier days, he was all about writing books and having his face plastered everywhere and going on shows and getting that notoriety and hustling and getting things. And later on in his life, as he became older and older, that stuff started to matter less. And his connection to God and his wanting to be at peace and feel good became more important. So that starts to bring to question, well, what's the right balance? Is working 80 hours a week for a couple of years going to bring me peace? And you start to ask yourself, well, it'll bring me peace in the long run if I just work really hard for now. And the other thing is like, well, I'm just going to drive myself crazy doing this, which I'm experiencing now, trying to manage a fund and a capital raise and build, a coaching program and writing a book, and then managing my own team and having to manage employees and putting in infrastructure. It's just crazy. It's like, there's too much stuff on my plate. But this feeling of overwhelm, I think it can be mitigated if you just basically take one thing and work on it one thing at a time.
That's
So
true.
this is part of the mindset stuff.
So let me ask you, I'm going to stop you right here. I'm going to ask you another question. You talked about earlier, you said getting your first deal done. Once you get your first deal done, you just feel like, oh, my confidence is like skyrocketed. Now I can do pretty much anything. So what if you get rejection in your first deal? You're not able to raise,
you just
maybe
keep
let's say
going.
not even 50,000. So how would you deal with that rejection? I think that was the main fear for most of the people when they get started on the capital raising side. So if you can shed some light or share your experience, because you have a very diverse experience, started from JV to syndication and all the cool stuff that you're doing, and having multiple people on your show talking about all these different things, how did they deal with their rejection part, and then, went beyond that?
For a long time, I thought that the law of the first deal didn't apply to me, because I had mentioned that I took down some fourplexes in my early days. And then when I broke up with my partner, I was like, I never want to have another partner again. That was just like a brutal breakup. And I was just like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not skilled enough to go out and be my own fourplex buyer. But when I opened up to the possibility of partnering again, then some of that confidence came back. Hey, I've already taken down some fourplexes, even though those are smaller. I mean, for me at the time, I was just like, a fourplex, that's huge. Like that's more than a single family home. I thought that it was so crazy. And now, like, we're taking down $40 million construction projects in the build to rent space. But that first deal, whether it's a single family wholesale or a flip or a passive investment, it leads to confidence that even if you, for some reason, end up like me, going back to corporate America, if you keep on grinding and exhibit a display of resilience, that like, I'm going to keep doing this until I do it, and you have that unwavering and unshakable quality about yourself that says, I'm going to keep doing whatever I need to do until I get my first deal. That's part of the mindset you have to have, especially when you're dealing with rejection in the early days, or in the first few deals, or when you don't get something done, or your partnership breaks down. If you keep trying, this is like one of the number one keys to success, because if you keep working at it, eventually you'll do it. I don't know if you guys that have gone to college can experience this, but when you're in college, you're like, oh, this organic chemistry class at 7 a.m. is impossible. Like, how am I ever going to pass this class? But you have a certain level of confidence because you see 150 other people in the class that are all going through it with you. And you know that there's been hundreds of classes prior to you that have figured out a way to pass those classes and get their degree, no matter how crazy and long it takes. You know that other people can do it. What's the same thing with syndication? And if you can wrap your mind around that, there's other people that have been successful. And if you just follow the same things and do the same things that these people did and do, that eventually you're going to either figure it out or have some level of success. But you have to be willing to deal with that 7 a.m. class and just like, oh, this sucks, I hate it, I didn't get the A, I only got a B, or this concept of like, this is going to be impossible. If you just stick it out and realize that if you stay on the path, you'll eventually get that degree, or in your case, or this case, your first deal. That's the big thing. But in the world of entrepreneurialism, there's no visible proof that a bunch of people have graduated that have gotten their first degree. You just have to kind of go and seek it and believe it. But understand this, like, I've interviewed 250 people, and there's like, a few hundred different multifamily syndication podcasts that exist right now. And if all of those guys can do it, then everybody on this call, first of all, I commend you for being here and educating yourself and stepping into this world if you're not already there. And for those that are already there, for you to continue to, I commend you for scaling yourself and investing in your own mindset to get to the places where you want to go. And it starts by networking and meeting people and listening to other people's experiences. But this is part of the process that we have to all go through. And if we can just stay on the path without exiting, without getting shiny object syndrome, and just focus and be confident that if you continue to put in the work, eventually a deal will get done, then it doesn't matter how long, And the other mindset thing that I should bring up here is that you don't want to compare yourself to other people. You want to just compare yourself to who you were last year and have you made progress? Because when I'm looking at like Zach Happenstall, who I met when he was doing his first 1031 JV syndication partnership structure a couple years ago, I was just like almost at the same level as him. He was working on his first deal or two, and I had done a couple of deals. But you see him, and he's scaled to this multi-billion-dollar asset company that's got like $1 billion just in Phoenix, and now they're stepping into Dallas. And if you think of like a rose, if you have a group of roses or flowers, they don't all bloom at the same time, and you got to be okay with that natural process, that things happen on God's timing. And regardless of if it takes you longer to blossom, there's nothing wrong with that. You just got to be on your own path. So I'd recommend be of the mindset that you're going to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes until you get your first deal, because then from there, that's going to launch you into the future of scaling. And a lot of people think that they should be doing a lot more than they do. I think Tony Robbins says they overestimate what they can complete in 1 year, and they completely underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. Right.
Yeah.
So like
So
for
you
me,
have to break it down. Yeah.
yeah. So just keep at it. So that's what I got to say about mindset.
Yeah. I love your analogy about the class and the students, when we are younger and when we are in school or college, how we are so focused. We know we wanted to graduate, we wanted to pass our 10th grade or the master's or whatever, bachelor's, whatever we have done in our life. But as we grow older, we forget about all those skills that we had or the mindset that we had. So we are like more towards, I cannot do it. I mean, if I could do it 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, in my case, 35 years ago, when I started in kindergarten, maybe, why can't I do it now? And I love that mindset, Ruben. I love that analogy. And I think everybody should follow that. And then the key takeaway from you is just like, stay focused and be consistent with your efforts. I'm going to open it up for everybody. So please unmute yourself and ask any questions, because this is like kind of a group interactive kind of session that we have for everybody. So anybody has any questions, raise your hand or just like unmute yourself and ask the question.
Well, since nobody is going to raise their hand, I'll raise my hand.
Go ahead.
Jalen here. My first question is, I'm just now learning, getting into the capital raising strategy. I do have a capital raiser, but we need to bring in more investors. So what was your hardest challenge with meeting these big investors and convincing them to fund your first deal?
So that's a mindset problem right there, is that you don't convince people to invest with you. I've heard this from a ultra high net worth individual named Salvatore Buscemi, author of a number of capital raising books. And he said, this could potentially, capital raising for commercial real estate could be probably is the very most hardest form of sales that exists on the planet today, because you're asking people to walk away with a portion of their nest egg that they've been working for. So when you're trying to convince somebody to do that, you're already in the wrong mindset. All that you can really do, I think, this is probably a little oversimplified, but all that you really want to be doing is educating and nurturing people, and then understanding that not everybody's going to resonate with you, and that the people that want to work with you will self-select. So you want to share from a place of confidence about your product, and be very confident about it. But you don't typically want to be a salesman in the sense of like, I need to know everything about my deal, and I need to convert you, and I need to get on a call, and I need to put you into this deal right now. It's an education and nurturing process that happens over time, and you got to be okay with that. And while you might be in a situation like I was at my first company where they're just like, where's the capital? We need the capital. We have a deal under contract. We need the money now, 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 now. And you got to understand and be okay with the fact that that doesn't work like that. You can't just turn on a switch and be like, let me go get the capital by having a conversation with somebody and closing them. And that's where I think a lot of people meet a great deal of frustration and resistance from people, because if you're selling somebody like that, people can smell that, at least particularly in this environment of today. We've been so bombarded with sales and marketing for so long where we're not receptive to the old school hard sell techniques anymore. And we can smell it from a mile away, right? When somebody's coming to you and you know that they're wanting to close you, or that they have some pressing need that they need to raise capital for their deal, they're gonna feel it subconsciously, and then you're probably gonna have some kind of resistance internally too to being able to be your true self and your natural version of yourself, because you have an agenda. So you got to be okay with the process of just educating and nurturing and allowing people to self-select. And then if you're afraid of rejection, you can use this particular metaphor. You think about a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant, and she's going around the restaurant going, who wants coffee? And then, some people are going to be like, no, I'm good. Like I'm getting ready to leave. And other people are be like, no, I'm good. I'm still full. And then some people in the restaurant will be like, yes, I'm ready for some more coffee. And if you can understand that when people say no to you, it has nothing to do with you. It's just that they don't need any more coffee, right? It's the same thing with investing. Some people are not interested or are already full. Their cup is already full on the investing side. And other people out there, if you keep on going around to table to table to table, eventually you're going to find some people that are going to be like, yeah, I want some coffee, or yeah, I want to invest. So you have to be diligent of the process of, after going to like 10 tables and nobody wants coffee, to continue to go to the other tables until somebody says yes, right? So I would say that those things.
Yeah, I would like to add something to it. Just like I mentioned earlier, knowing yourself, that's very important, because knowing yourself is going to give you the confidence. So you need to have confidence in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. That gives you the can-do attitude that I can do it. I'm no less than anybody else. I'm a complete being within myself. And the other thing is, you need to be confident about your deal or whatever you're trying to present to the other side of the table. You have to believe in that. You need to think about all the possible questions that somebody can ask you and answer yourself and think about that. Do I believe in these answers that I'm giving? Would I do this deal for myself if somebody answer these questions for me? What other question can trigger from there? So this is like a little bit homework, but it's like preparing yourself to put yourself out in the market.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to one of my mentors, Dan Hanford of PassiveInvesting.com. And he likes to talk about raising capital. It's just an educating and nurturing process, but there's another sector that a lot of people confuse with raising capital, which is accepting capital. And you can educate and nurture all you want and have people self-select, but you still have to go to them and get them to, if they've already said, yes, I like you, I know you, I like you, I trust you, they're not going to automatically just wire funds. You still have to get them to once they've gone through that process of know, liking, and trusting you, is to wire the funds. And for some people, that's a very scary process, but they need to be handheld, right? So you have to guide them through that process, because they're not going to read your mind and say, hey, I've been educated and, and nurtured. It's time for me to wire the money. You actually have to have some systems in place that guide them through, like, this is how you place your money, and you have to ask them for that. But at that point, you're not selling. You're just guiding them through the last part, which is to place the money. But you're not going to raise capital if you don't take that little piece and then get them to convert. Now, getting that conversion is not selling. It's just kind of hand holding to get them across the finish line. But that's something that you're going to have to do too. That's not the point where you want to be selling. You might need to, encourage, but at that point, hopefully all of the sales process is already complete, which is the education and nurturing.
I like that. Thanks. Thanks,
Thank you.
Jalen. Anybody, do you have any follow-up, Jalen?
No, I was just saying thank you for that.
Of course. Anybody has questions, let me know. I'll bring you on the stage.
I do.
Go ahead.
Will you expand on what you mean by like shiny object syndrome? Because
Woo!
like, I mean, I'm interested in different types of assets, like self-storage, multifamily, and I want to go aggressive after that first deal. But yeah, at the same time, I'm afraid I'm getting that shiny object syndrome. So is that what you mean? Or do you mean by just like kind of staying in your lane? Like, I know I want to be on the asset management side.
That's a symptom of shiny object syndrome. But I would say, like looking back into my previous self, when I was like in my 20s and even in my early 30s, I wouldn't focus and I wouldn't have controlled attention. So I would see some marketing company, like a network or a multi-level marketing company, and I would start doing it. And before I ever had any success, I would go do something else, like sell something else. And then I'd go from business to working to wanting to launch a charity nonprofit to having a t-shirt company to wanting to invest in real estate while also doing multi-level marketing. And it was just like, I had too many irons in the fire. And if you don't control your attention to do one specific thing long-term and never give up and do not let anything else derail you, when you can turn on that level of concentration and controlled attention into, I am going to do one thing, like in my example, master capital raising, and I will not go do NFTs or Bitcoin or investing in gold or raising for IPOs or etc. Like all of these things will, you get bombarded by people that are just saying, hey, you should look at doing this. You're already so good at raising capital. Why don't you come raise capital for this? And it can be a very problematic situation for anybody of the marketing kind of personality type, because naturally one of our flaws is that we start things and we never finish. So if you can control your attention and say, I will not let myself be derailed until I have this one thing mastered, that is the right mindset for this particular marketing personality. It might be different for engineers. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but it's for us that are marketing of nature, and we have that kind of outgoing personality most of the time and like to network with people. We have that flaw where something comes up and, you hear things like you should have multiple sources of income, multiple sources of passive income. And you're like, okay, well, that means that I should be doing this and I should be doing this and I should be doing this and I should be doing this. And the reality is like, dude, for our personality type, you have to have one lane and stay in that lane until you have mastery over that lane.
Yeah.
So
I like that. Thanks, Ruben. I'm going to add to it, like he says, scattered focus is not going to get you anywhere. So perfect example, like you take the magnifying glass. Like you go, remember when we were kids, we go in the sun with the magnifying glass, we're trying to burn the paper unless like completely focused, it won't burn the paper. So that's the kind of analogy I wanted to use here. So if you wanted to be a capital raiser, stay in your lane, stay focused. And that's the way you're going to excel. And the patience is the key in that, because people will turn around, they'll come back to you because they will know who you are. Because you're omitting that kind of energy by giving them the confidence or the comfort level that they're looking for. Any follow-up questions?
No.
so fun. I'm so glad that you organized this.
Thank you so much. And we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna call it a day today, but I just wanted to mention that Ruben gave me a very good topic for next time. We're gonna talk about afraid of success. That's very important too. And success only comes to you when you're ready for success. And I'm gonna thank you everybody and take the chat with you, share your information, connect with each other, and I'll put my calendar link there as well. Ruben, please do that. And love to meet with you guys one-on-one, check our calendars and schedule something. Anybody has any last comment or anything, Ruben? Any last
Yeah.
comments?
For anybody that wants to talk shop on capital raising, I'm happy to do so. I'm going to put my calendar in the chat. I do have a podcast that I have to start here in about 1 minute. But for anybody that wants to reach out, feel free. Here's my cell phone number in there too.
Thank
Which
you
is-
so much, Ruben. We're on the top of the hour, and thanks everybody. I will see you next week at the same time on the same channel.